keep an eye on the participant room.
Absolutely, and I see that Robert is joining us now. Do you have that title slide up by any chance still, Craig?
Oh, am I not sharing?
Not at this second, no, it just kind of.
Well, let me fix that.
So as you already know, because you already joined the room, this is the very first in our virtual executive forum series. I've sent you a couple of emails and I'm not done yet. You'll get an email from me later today with a lot more detail about all of the remaining sessions, as well as options to register and further details about Summit, LinkedIn groups, all that good stuff. And I'll talk a little bit about that at the end of the session now, but just by way of introduction, wanted to assure you, this is the Out and Equal virtual executive forum series. I'm very excited for us to go through this session. This was originally intended to be basically our first session of our first full day. So I'm very excited that we can keep that intention going. And the idea is to provide us with new skills and frameworks for our leadership moving forward. So I'll talk a little bit more at the end, but for now, I just want to maximize our connection time. So I will turn it over to Craig.
All right. So thanks, Isabel, and thank you everyone for joining. So my name's Craig Souza. I'll get into a longer introduction later, but I want to sort of launch into getting you talking to each other first. So I am sure that after it feels like a year of shelter in place, folks are intimately familiar with Zoom. But for those who may use WebEx or some other platform, let me just give you a brief orientation to Zoom and how it works. So if you click on the participants list, you'll see a list of other folks in there. There's a hand raise feature in there, and there's also the ability to chat. If you select gallery view, you'll be able to see more of the participants. If at the top you select side-by-side view, you'll see the slide and my video. And going to speaker view, you'll just see the person speaking. So that may be useful to you. Please, just kind of for Zoom etiquette, if you're not speaking, mute yourself. And then also, we're about to go into breakout rooms for dyad discussions. And so you'll see a little pop-up window that just says the host is inviting you to a breakout room. And when you see that, just click that and you'll go into the breakout room. And then when the breakout rooms close, you'll see a little pop-up window that says you'll be returned to the main session in 60 seconds. You don't have to do anything. You can, if you want, just I'm out of here and go back to the main session and click the button. But if you do nothing, you'll automatically be returned to the main session after 60 seconds. So let's get started. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put folks in pairs in the breakout room. And you're going to have 4 minutes to share on 2 topics. And just make sure you both get an opportunity to share in that 4 minutes. So the first is, what are some positive things that you're noticing during this time? You know, this time of COVID. Cleaner air, getting to know people's children as they drop in on conference calls. And also the reality is we are going through a traumatic period and we should acknowledge that. So what are some of your biggest challenges or fears that you have during this time? So those are your topics. You can jot them down or take a screenshot or just memorize them. And I'm going to now put people into breakout rooms. So let me see. Okay, and we have an even number, so there should be 2 participants per room. If you find yourself in a room alone, I will notice and I will do something about it. So I'll either move you into a breakout room, and so I'll be keeping an eye out to make sure everyone has someone to talk to. And if you wind up in a group of 3, then so be it. But it looks like we've got an even number now. So off we go.
Hello, Craig.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. I guess, let's see, are we host invited?
Yeah, we're putting folks into breakout rooms, and so we're just sharing on. Oh, all right. All right. And if you're watching the recording, use this opportunity to simply journal on these topics. So, what are some positive things that you're noticing during this time, or what are some of your biggest challenges and fears? So, I'm going to pause the recording so you can pause it as well, and we'll see you back just give yourself 2 or 3 minutes to journal. Yeah, that's perfect. That is perfect. So everyone else will be back in the main session in just a second. All right. And we're back. Okay. And so, so I have resumed the recording. And so just to let folks know, this session is being recorded, but the breakout rooms are entirely private. So is the chat. So, so nothing said in the breakout rooms will be recorded. So let's take a few comments. Is there anyone who would like to share what came up in your breakout rooms about what are some positive things you're noticing during this time, or what are some of your biggest challenges? And you can just raise your hand in the participant room if you'd like to share. Cass, please unmute yourself.
Yeah, hi everyone. I was just actually telling my group that I was speaking with an Indian counterpart the other day, and we were chatting about what has changed positively or what will change. And it came up that the women's rights movement is going to change drastically because of this. No longer are we going to be able to tell women that they can't work from home when they're taking care of their kids. That if they have family stuff that keeps them from the office and they have to work from home, that they can't do that anymore. I think a lot of the excuses that we've used around preventing people because they might require some remote situations, so, caretakers, people who are taking care of their adult loved ones and things like that fall into this category too. And we just can't use that excuse anymore because we've proven it. You can have kids running around in the back room and or in the background, and dogs and animals making noise, and we can figure out how to make it work, right? So I think that's going to be a big change post-COVID that will be a positive thing for a lot of marginalized folks.
Yeah, awesome. Simon.
Hey guys. So what I've noticed, I'm in North America. We have probably 6 offices in North America for the New Zealand government. And what I've noticed is a dramatic increase in collaboration and engagement since going to home. So before we would stick to our silos within our offices, but now the burden of communication is identical from someone who used to sit next door to you, to someone in New York, to someone in New Zealand. And I was talking to Disney the other day, a friend of mine over there who's quite senior, and Disney's noticed the same thing, that they've seen a massive increase in collaboration and engagement since going to Zoom and at home. So now they're re-looking at, and their senior leaders are going, hey, it's actually quite nice to be at home with family and to have this better balance. So they're completely, as we are, re-looking at what our work-life balance looks like and our flexible work policies look like.
Awesome. Yeah, and I know we're having some of those similar discussions at HP.
Yeah.
It's yeah, yeah, the implications that both of you talked about, I think, are really, really huge. So let's just take a minute, because for some of us, depending on what time zone you're in, this could be the end of the day or the beginning of the day. We're running from meeting to meeting, So let's just take a minute to fully arrive for this session and just sort of settle in. So just find a posture that's relaxed and alert. And if it feels comfortable, you can close your eyes, or you can leave them slightly open with a soft gaze. And just bring in a long, slow, deep breath in through your nose and out. And another breath in. And out. And once more, breathing in. And out. Simply noticing what's the quality of your breath right now. How do you know you're breathing? Feel the warm air moving past your upper lip as you exhale. Cool air as you inhale. Rising and falling of your belly, your chest. And just for a moment, consider your intention for joining this meeting. So curiosity, connection, whatever that is for you. And just one more breath in together and out. Coming back into the room. So that's what is known in my world as an arrival practice. So it's a good way to just kind of just settle in and leave sort of the last thing we were doing aside and fully arriving for the interaction that we're going to have. So now let's kind of get into introductions. So my name's Craig Souza, and my day job is I work at HP in corporate enterprise sales. So I'm a managed print services guy. And my gay job is I am part of our Pride Employee Resource Group in Palo Alto. And then I have another side hustle as a mindfulness and emotional intelligence teacher and trainer. So I do that work inside and outside of HP. And I'm so thrilled to be doing this for Out and Equal, because so I'll give a slightly different, it's actually not that different from the introduction I normally give, but Out and Equal was sort of what started this journey for me to doing this work. And so this is kind of like a full circle moment for me. So it's so I love that I get to share this work with you. So about 10 years ago, probably, I've never bothered to go back and look at the history of where the conferences were, but it was in Dallas, Texas. I found myself at this conference, this Out and Equal conference, and this woman was like talking from the stage about bringing your whole self to work. And at that point in my life, I was like, really? Do I want to do that? Because I wasn't sure if that was a good thing or not. Because my attitude then was HP was the ATM that I, withdrew money from so that I could go have my life, which was entirely separate from work. And I was definitely in that category of people who I was, people used to say, Craig, man, you're all business, because that was really all I would talk about. And I wasn't in the closet. I've been, I'm very fortunate. I went to college in Santa Cruz, came out in college, moved to San Francisco, have been out everywhere I've worked. I actually interviewed at HP already out, so I came pre-out to HP. So it wasn't that I was closeted, but I wasn't really, I still wasn't really fully integrated with like work and life. And that got me thinking, it's like, what would it be like if the Craig that showed up at work was the same Craig that my friends got, and that, you know, I'm a theater person, that's my degree, and I'm on the board of a theater, and I act and I direct. And so, you know, the same Craig that shows up at rehearsal is the same Craig that shows up at HP. It's like, what would that look like? And eventually came to the conclusion that, yeah, that'd be pretty cool. And then started to get involved with, you know, meditation and mindfulness practice. And that was through the San Francisco Zen Center. And which I actually started as part of recovery. So I'm also a recovering alcoholic, which I don't normally talk about, but I remember it out in Equal. It was I forget what you know, like the day before, you know, like the deeper dive sessions. And we did this thing of what are we closeted about? And they put the pieces of paper and you walked towards the thing that you're closeted about. And I went to mental health. And I'm like, well, I'm in recovery. And that was the biggest group. And I had this realization that, wow, nobody's talking about mental health. You know, addiction and recovery and depression and bipolar disorder. And so that was really interesting to me. So that's the first time I've outed myself as someone in recovery in an intro, but it's out and equal. So we'll play with something new. And so this sort of began this journey for me of then getting involved in culture and engagement at HP, sort of beyond the Pride work, and then finding some mentors and people in San Francisco doing work around conscious leadership. And it was actually someone I met through that work who we were on a hike, and he said, hey, you know, I know you're interested in culture, you're interested in mindfulness, you're interested in kind of conscious capitalism and healing organizations. Maybe you should look at Search Inside Yourself Leadership Institute, and because they bring mindfulness and emotional intelligence training into organizations, and maybe that would be interesting for you. So about 2 years ago, I signed up and wrote a check and started the teacher training program for Search Inside Yourself Leadership Institute. And last August became certified, and now I've taught the full 2-day class 3 times at HP in Costa Rica and in Boise, Idaho, and in Palo Alto. And I've done some half-day trainings, and I've also taught at Facebook. So it's been just a delight doing this work, because it sort of brings all these different threads of, you know, business and mindfulness and diversity and inclusion and bringing our full selves to work into one like neat little bow for me. So as leaders within Out and Equal, thank you for helping create this organization so people like me can have these journeys. And so yeah, so I'm super excited. So I went on a little longer than I normally do, but it's I'm just really happy to be with all of you, and you're a big part of why I'm here. So thank you. So what I'd like to do, because we have you know, a fairly large group and only 90 minutes, if you could just, for your own intros, just kind of put in the chat window just where you're located. We already have your name. And what is your intention for joining today? Is there something you'd like to learn? Was there something that motivated you to join today? Just go ahead and put that in the chat. Learn more about mindfulness, slow down. Yeah. LA, motivation, effectiveness as a leader, Portland, Seattle, learn about leadership, better career homosexual. Love it. More skills to the leadership toolbox. Yeah, what can we bring back? Leadership, networking, new perspective on leadership. Okay. Impact on folks, network, leadership. Okay, great. So a lot of focus on how this can influence leadership. More leadership tools. Okay. Presence, yeah, being present, it's super important. Another Oregonian. Folks live in suburb of Portland. All right, great. So we're definitely going to be talking about leadership and how mindfulness and emotional intelligence practice supports that. So I think you're in the right place. So let's talk a little bit about the structure of Search Inside Yourself. So there's sort of three primary areas of focus in SIY. So the first is emotional intelligence. A lot of this is built on Daniel Goleman's emotional intelligence framework, which we're going to talk a little bit more about later. And then also looking at, the neuroscientific research around the areas of mindfulness and emotional intelligence, and looking at how the brain works and the research that's been done around that. And then mindfulness is sort of the foundation. So a lot of us over the years have had maybe trainings on emotional intelligence and empathy and how to relate better to other people. And, we've read How to Win Friends and Influence People. Mindfulness, SIYLI and I view as sort of the enabler for that. So if we're actually present, where am I? In my mind, in my body, in my presence, in my interactions with other people, allowing us to pay more attention enables us to actually to kind of look at, how am I being in this moment? How am I in this interaction with people? So that's the lens through which we're looking at mindfulness. It really becomes the how of becoming more emotionally intelligent. And then the neuroscience just kind of tells us this is getting under the hood of how this stuff actually works. So just by kind of show of hands in the room, since we're all on webcam, have folks read this book, Daniel Goleman's Emotional Intelligence book? It's really good. So he's considered, he's not really the father of emotional intelligence, but he certainly popularized it. And is also definitely, one of the primary people in this field. And so the domains of emotional intelligence are self-awareness, self-management, motivation, which is more about, it's less about, I want a Porsche Carrera Ford Targa, blue preferably, than why do I get out of bed in the morning? What do I really care about? What are my values? And am I doing work that's in alignment with that? Empathy, which is awareness of others, and then social skills, which Search Inside Yourself frames as leadership. So we kind of looking at this through the lens of how do we show up as leaders? And, so this all sounds great, to be super emotionally intelligent and mindful all the time, but this is our world, right? So, we've got all these multiple inputs coming at us 24/7, and now we've got this new thing that's up for us, with COVID. So everywhere we go, it's all COVID all the time. We're looking at the trackers and how is San Francisco doing versus the rest of the country. And LinkedIn is now a source of, well, how do we deal with burnout in the pandemic era? And then from a little closer to home is it feels like we kind of can't catch a break on the LGBT front. And I did want to put this in here just to kind of acknowledge Amy and maybe just take a moment to hold her in our hearts. So this is our reality. This is what we're going through right now, and it's stressful. if anyone likes their acronyms more than corporate America, it's the military. And so in the post-Cold War era, the U.S. Army War College came up with a term to describe the uncertainty that was appearing, in the post-Cold War era, and it was VUCA, this volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world that was emerging. And then it started to get used a lot more in corporate America and corporate training and in business contexts. So I've actually seen this slide a lot, not just in SIYLI trainings, but a lot of people are talking about this VUCA world in which we live, and it seems to be getting more and more VUCA every day. So this is sort of where we're at. And then this is the other kind of getting into how we're wired. This was a study of General Mills executives that Killingsworth did for the Mindful Leadership Institute. And looking at leaders, for most of them, 40% of their time was spent mind wandering. And mind wandering, just to kind of put a definition around it, because mind wandering can be great, right? We go to Walden Pond and we let our mind wander and great things happen. But in this context, mind wandering is when we're thinking about something other than what we're doing. So if we're thinking about something other than what we're doing, that's not necessarily good. And many of us are spending about half of our time doing that. This is kind of scary, but 70% of leaders reported that they had a hard time being attentive in meetings. And maybe some of us have been in meetings with those leaders who, oh yeah, right? And how many of us maybe have done it ourselves? And we all know we need to combat this, right? Yeah, we've all been that person at some point or another. And so we all know we're supposed to combat this. We're supposed to carve out time to read. We have these stacks of books that we mean to read. And, we should check email twice a day and do time blocking to do work. And yet the awful truth is that only 2% of us regularly carve out time to enhance our productivity. So this is just sort of the reality of it. And so the result is we're running on autopilot. I don't know about any of you, but certainly this has happened to me a few times in the past 3 weeks where like Eric has walked in the door to say, are we going to have dinner? And I'm like, where did the day go? What happened? So this is our life, right? So what are the traits of autopilot? What does that look like? So it looks like our attention's in the past. It's like, wow, I wish that last call had gone better. Or it's in the future. It's like, with my future right now is, when is the next large enterprise customer going to call me up and say, how are you going to help me save 20% of my spend? And I need the answer in a week, because we're making our pandemic plans. And, and the current thing I'm getting a lot is, we think maybe 25% of our workforce is going to be a teleworker, and how do they print? Okay. So the fun part is I'm getting new puzzles to figure out in my day job, and I like puzzles, but boom, so there's some of this anticipatory stress. It's like, wow, what's next? We're distractive, we're reactive, we're in judgment. If these other people would just do things the way I think they should, my life would be so much better. And we're acting just based on habit patterns and assumptions. So this, for me, so this is, a lot of people say this is a Viktor Frankl quote. It's actually not. It's quoting Stephen Covey summarizing the work of Viktor Frankl. But for me, if there's like one slide when you get the deck that you print out and you tape to the wall of your home now, or your cube, if we ever go back to the office, kind of sums up mindfulness and emotional intelligence for me. Between stimulus and response, there is space. Between stimulus, a Facebook post where, we get triggered, and response, with this send, and we feel better, but, we just maybe pissed off and alienated some of our relatives. Between stimulus and response, there is space. In that space lies our power to choose our response. in that response lies our growth and our freedom. So the way I think about, mindfulness and emotional intelligence is, how do we create a little more space for ourselves to make better decisions and perhaps react in a more skillful way to things that come our way that are challenging. So I really love, and actually, so the full SIY class is 2 days long and has 284 slides. This is the only slide that appears twice. And so, I remember when I was in school, they always said, if the teacher says it twice, it's going to be on the test. So I think this is a really important concept. So I really like it. So we're on autopilot. Help me. How do we get off of autopilot? So what we're going to talk about today is using the tool of mindfulness to help us kind of get off of autopilot. So what's mindfulness? So it's out there in the zeitgeist. Everybody's talking about it, especially now. It feels like since COVID, I don't know about your companies, but like HP's like bringing in just one speaker after another to help us, be more resilient and help us manage stress and help us take better care of our health. And there's like, I've got like invitations for, if I took every invitation for a meditation practice right now, that's all I would do all day. Because every mindfulness teacher in the world is out there offering free mindfulness stuff. Take advantage of it if you can. So we're going to talk about it very simply as being present. In this moment, where am I? Mentally, physically, in my body, in my interactions with others. So it's simply being present. So we're going to stick with a very simple definition. What it's really about is, how do we move from being on autopilot to being aware, right? So am I aware of how I'm being in this moment? So now we're going to talk about self-awareness. And one of the things about SIYLI is that the whole point of SIYLI is to make mindfulness practical and accessible. And one of the ways that we do this is through what we call a micro practice. And so this is one that comes in very handy for maybe starting a meeting with your team, or after we hang up from a conference call and before we pick up the phone, or who picks up a phone anymore, before we hit the button to activate Skype or Zoom for our next meeting. I'm just realizing millennials will never even know what that means. Like, pick up the phone. And also how we create shifts. For example, moving from a work context to being with our partner or our kids, which now that we're all doing work and that in the same place, how do we do that? So this practice is done on 3 breaths. And so let's go ahead and give it a whirl. So just find a posture again that's just relaxed and alert. And we're going to take 3 breaths together. And with our first breath, we're going to pay full and gentle attention to the breath, noticing the in-breath, the space, and the out-breath. With the second breath, we're just noticing if there's any tension in our body. I carry mine in my jaw and my shoulders. And wherever we notice that on the exhale, seeing if we can relax that one small measure. And with the third breath, we simply hold the question, what's important right now? So let's go ahead and try that. You can leave your eyes open or closed, breathing in. And out. This next breath, relaxing the body, one small measure. And with the next breath, what's important right now? So Annette Friskop, who's who's on the Out and Equal board, and she's our global executive sponsor. For a while there, she was, I don't know if she still is, I hope she still is. You can ask her next time you see her. She was starting her staff meetings with this practice. She said it was really interesting. Then she'd do check-ins and ask people what showed up as what's most important right now. And sometimes that wasn't on the agenda, but that's what's important right now. So integrating little micro practices like this into our day-to-day lives is one way to make these practices a lot more accessible. So there's our first mindfulness practice. So let's talk a little bit about the research. So essentially, this field of the neuroscience of mindfulness started with people who were generally studying psychology. So Richie Davidson, Daniel Goleman, you know, were studying psychology, and they were meditating, and they're like, and then fMRI scanners came out, and they went, gee, I wonder what people's brains look like when they meditate. And the field of neuroscientific research was born. And now there's a lot more work being done around this stuff. So this is tracking PubMed. So PubMed, for those who may not be in academia, is really just, it's a database that tracks what are people writing about, what are people studying, what are people publishing academic research on. And if you looked at PubMed in the early 90s, nobody was writing about mindfulness. If you looked at PubMed by 2019, there were a lot of articles being published around mindfulness and emotional intelligence. I actually just last week, just for giggles, pulled up PubMed. I typed in mindfulness, and I got 5,000 hits. And now to put it in perspective, I then typed in bipolar depression, and I got 50,000 hits. So the research around mindfulness and its impact on the brain is still pretty much in its infancy, but it's pointing towards a few key things. So the first is this idea of neuroplasticity. So there was this thinking for a long time that basically we're born with a certain amount of gray matter, and we're either smart or we're dumb, and that's our destiny. And what we've learned is that's completely false. We can rewire and create new neural pathways in the brain well into our 70s. So that's the good news. And what people have been studying is, can we look at neural differences in experienced meditators and novice controls? So this is a study done by Antoine Brewer at Yale. And this was looking at the default mode network, which is really, it's the part of our brain that is correlated to mind wandering, and it's basically essentially the part of our brain where we're thinking about ourselves, and I'm thinking about, what do you think of me? And it's also the part of the brain where the activity or the amount of activity correlates with unhappiness. So the more our default network is going on, the less happy we are, and the less we're just thinking about ourselves, and the more present we are, we tend to be happier. And so they wanted to look at what was happening in that part of the brain while people were practicing different kinds of meditations. They were looking at focused attention practice, loving kindness, and choiceless awareness. Should know this stuff. Anyway, so that was the third kind. So those are the three types of meditation they were asking people to practice. So they looked at experienced practitioners, mostly Tibetan monks. So these are people who have 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 hours of meditation, and comparing them to people who'd had just about 18 hours of training in meditation. What they found is the default mode network was less active during meditation, but they also noticed that just while they were hooking people up to the scanners and before the experiment had started, is the default mode network tended to be less active in people who'd done a lot of meditation. What they also noticed was greater connectivity in the attention management regions, sort of the executive center of the brain, in the experienced meditators. So just greater attentional control and attention management. Oops. So this was a study done by Antoine Lutz at University of Wisconsin, and this one I thought was really interesting. So this is really looking at the salience network. It's literally the part of our brain that decides what's important to us, and the amygdala is part of that, and it's the brain's alarm system. You know, so that's the part of the brain that is very old evolutionarily. So another guy who I teach SIY with, the class is always co-taught. And so one of the co-teachers is a guy named Luis Gill. He's based in New Jersey. And he was sharing that we are all basically descended from neurotic, fearful people. Because the people, you know, millions of years ago who heard a rustle in the bushes and went, tiger, run, survived. And the people who heard a rustle in the bushes and went, got eaten. So the amygdala is scanning for threats, right? And essentially an email from our boss with the subject line urgent is a threat. and our body processes that accordingly. And so a lot of us are walking around triggered all the time, scanning for threats, scanning for threats, scanning for threat, which is what leads to burnout. And so this experiment is really looking at how does the salience network, is it different in people who are experienced meditators versus novices? The way they tested for this was they attached a thermode to the forearms of people that would apply a pain stimulus. It didn't actually like leave burns, but it would give you the sensation of pain. And so they wanted to look at what would happen in experienced and novice meditators. So they got some grad students. They said, hey, here's $50. We're going to put this thermode on you. It's going to hurt. And we're going to look at your brain to see what happens when we're hurting you. And this is what is really interesting. So we talked about mindfulness as being present, right? So with the control group, there was a lot of anticipatory amygdala reaction. So they were like, oh, this is going to hurt. And their threat center was already lit up, and their pain matrix was already lit up in the brain because they knew they were about to get hurt. And then if you looked at the experienced meditators, there was nothing there because they weren't actually in pain yet. Here's the bad news. You can shave your head, go to Tibet, sit in a cave for 3 years. Pain is still going to hurt. So the pain stimulus is noticed by novice and experienced meditators at pretty much the same intensity. But there was a lot less reported unpleasantness afterwards. So the return to baseline is a lot faster. So this really goes to, in my mind, resilience, right? So a painful stimulus comes at us. We're like, oh, this sucks. And then we're quickly able to return to baseline. So that's what this study was looking at. And this is looking at search inside yourself. So this is, so when people take the class, there's a pre-assessment, and then there's a 28-day challenge, and people are practice mindfulness practices, and then we do another survey at the end. And so this is looking at 384 participants in 15 different countries, sort of before and after. And this is looking at when in conflict with someone, am I able to take time to fully understand what's driving their perspective? It's a measure for empathy. And we saw measurable differences there. And this is the, that sacred pause, the Viktor Frankl pause, I like to call it, is am I able to pause before reacting? And also meaningful changes. And HP is a very small sample size. We've just had 3 classes, but we've noticed meaningful changes and similar results at HP, which has been nice. So what are some mindfulness practices? So we're going to talk about both integrated and dedicated practices. So to relate this to something like weight loss, the integrated practice would be, we park our car at the far end of the parking lot at the mall. Remember when we used to go to malls? Maybe one day we'll get to go again. And, so we park our car at the far corner of the parking lot so we get a few extra steps in, or we take the stairs instead of the elevator at work when we went to work. And that's how we got our extra steps in. And then the dedicated practice is I'm gonna go to the gym and I'm gonna spend half an hour on the elliptical. So it's the same thing with mindfulness. So an integrated practice might be the 3 breaths practice that we did earlier, or simply taking a minute to arrive before a meeting. And then a dedicated practice would be like a focused attention practice. And so to that end, I'm going to share a focused attention practice with all of you. So just by show of hands on your, you can just put your hand up on your webcam. If you have a story around, I can't meditate because my brain won't stop thinking. Yeah, that was my story that I had, was, because I aspired to be a person who meditated. I bought a cushion, I bought a fountain, I bought some incense, but I could just never quite motivate myself to get up at 4 a.m. and sit on my cushion for half an hour, because that was how meditation was done. That was the right way to meditate. And so I never did it. And then I actually took a class at Stanford. So Stanford actually has an institute. It's the Center for Compassion and Altruism Research and Education, CCARE for short, at the Stanford School of Medicine. And so they do it, the Compassion Cultivation Training. It's an 8-week course. I highly recommend it. But the gentleman teaching that class, I asked him, I said, should I meditate in the morning or at night? And does it matter? And the answer was, it really doesn't matter what time of day you meditate. And sure, 20 minutes is great, but if all you can do is 1 minute, that's all you can do. And that you do it every day is more important than how long you do it. And so that actually was what helped me kind of quit judging my meditation and develop a daily practice. So, and then the other story about we can't stop our brains, well, guess what? Our brain thinks. That's the brain's job. So the stomach secretes juices, the brain secretes thoughts, and if we're trying to stop our thoughts about all we're going to get out of that is a headache, because it's not something we're able to do. So we're going to walk through an exercise to help us develop a focused attention practice. And the first step of this practice is really to bring to mind an intention for the practice. Why are we giving this a whirl? And so we put in the chat earlier some of our intentions: to become a better leader, to be more present with others, to slow down, to be more relaxed, to manage stress, whatever that intention is for you. And then lightly holding that intention, we then follow the breath. So we use the breath generally as an object of meditation because the breath is always present. If we're not breathing, we have other problems. Breath doesn't work for everyone, and that's okay. So another object of meditation could be if you have your hands in your lap, feeling the sensation of your palms making contact with the fabric of your clothing. So that can be an object of meditation, paying attention to the contact of your hands with your jeans or your skirt, whatever you're wearing. But we're going to use breath for now, but feel free to substitute that if that's not working for you. And so we follow the breath, the breathing in, the breathing out, and then we start thinking about email, or is this call going to end on time, or what am I going to have for lunch, or dinner, or whatever that might be. And then we notice the distraction is the next step, and then we reorient our attention back to the object. So the object of meditation is not to stop our thoughts. The object is actually to notice when we're distracted and bring our attention back. And that's actually how we're exercising that muscle. That's the rep, if you want to, relate it to weight training. So we're following our breath, start thinking about, email, or, oh, is my dog barking? And then we notice, and then we bring our attention back. So that's the idea. And the name of the game is we reorient our attention maybe before we've thinking about, I'm going to get this email, and then I'm not gonna get what I want, and then this is gonna be my response, and then that guy's gonna send this email back to me, and then I'm gonna escalate, and now I'm pacing the hallway making a speech about how this is gonna go. Has anyone else done this, or am I the only one? So before we've gone all the way there to getting that person fired or getting fired ourselves, we bring our attention back. Oh, I'm thinking about this email, coming back to the breath. Okay? And so it's really how much more quickly can we notice that distraction and reorient our attention. So now we're going to try it together. So I'm going to set the timer on my phone. I'm not looking at texts, I'm setting my timer. So again, just finding a posture that's relaxed and alert. And we can close our eyes or just leave them slightly open with a soft gaze. And let's begin by connecting with your intention for doing this practice. Maybe healthier ways to relate to stress, being more focused and productive, being more skillful as a leader. If you don't have any clear intention, that's fine. Maybe just interested in giving this practice a try. And so now bring your attention to the breath. Where is the breath alive for you? Perhaps you can feel cool air moving past your upper lip as you breathe in. Warm air moving past your upper lip on the exhale. Perhaps your belly expanding and contracting. Noticing if your breath is fast or slow. And just noticing without judgment. There's no magic meditation breath. However you're breathing is fine. See if you can pay attention to one complete cycle of breath. Breathing in, a slight pause between the in-breath and the out-breath. Noticing any tension in your body, simply allowing that to soften. And if thoughts come in, simply noticing the thought and gently bringing your attention back to the object of attention, to the breath. When thoughts come in, we're not trying to actively squelch them or push them away. We're simply noticing them and allowing them just to drift away. Observing the thoughts like we would clouds in the sky. If it helps, you can count the cycles of breath. An in-breath and an out-breath is 1. The next in-breath and out-breath, 2. Counting up to 10 and then starting over. And if you lose count or a thought comes in, just gently returning back to 1. So just for the next 30 seconds, simply giving your full and gentle attention to the breath until I ring the bell. And so opening your eyes, coming back into the room. And if you'd like, you can stretch. We've been sitting for quite a while and can even stand up. I really just want to prove that I'm wearing pants by standing up. We always wonder on these Zoom calls. So would anyone like to share what happened for them in that focused attention practice, or ask a question? Again, if you go to the participants window, you can raise your hand. If you'd like to make a comment or ask a question. Don't make it past 2, that's fine. So the exclamation point maybe implies a little self-judgment. So one thing that's important, and again, if folks can raise their hand and come off mute and talk live, I've just noticed with Zoom, popcorn style does not work because people wind up talking over each other. So again, I welcome your voices, but just raise your hand and I'll call on you and unmute yourself. But one thing that I found for me in this practice that really helped is moving from there I go again, thinking, to, oh, there I go again, thinking. And just with being a little more gentle and a little more kind and bringing a little more humor. So rather than, beating myself up for not being able to do this right, going, oh, okay, there I go again, thinking. It's a subtle but really important shift. So Simon.
Hey guys, so I did. You may actually know him, a guy called Scott Craig, who does a lot of this kind of work. He's a Strozzi aficionado, and we did a lot of this stuff. And one thing that worked for me was, as you say, not getting angry and just kind of going, even if your mind wanders 1,000 times, that's okay. It's the fact that you notice it wander 1,000 times, which is the important part of this. I know I need to get back into my practices. There's a book by a Stanford professor called James R. Doty called Into Magic Shop, which is, I think I've given away about 20 copies of that. And I think the people I've given it away to have given away another 20 copies. And he lists in there some nice practices as well around this. So if anyone wants to learn the practices, I highly recommend. It's probably my favorite book of all times.
Yeah. So into the magic shop, James Doty
Yep.
is the gentleman who actually founded the Center for Compassion and Altruism Research and Education at the Stanford School of Medicine.
Nice.
Yeah, he's a neurosurgeon, and he's amazing. Yeah, and that I highly also, I second that. That book was, I would say that and the compassion cultivation training at Stanford were like kind of life-changing things for me. So highly recommend that. And also the Strozzi Institute. So again, we're talking about, breath-based work, mindfulness work, somatic work can also be really important. So Strozzi Institute really focuses on somatic work. And actually a woman who is part of my cohort, she's another SIYLI teacher, did the Strozzi Institute. And I watched this woman just transform over the course of about a year. And I asked her, I said, what happened? I mean, it was a good what happened. And she gave all the credit to Strozzi and the somatic work and really getting into her body and realizing what was she holding in her body. So there's so many different ways to look at this. So finding what works for you is really important. So Lindsay, Alexander technique is another one. Actually, one of the SIYLI teachers in my pod is an Alexander teacher. And so yeah, there's so many different approaches to this. I keep running into, actually the woman who runs change management at HP. I was talking to her about mindfulness, and her mindfulness practice is riding horses. You have to be present when you're on a horse or bad things can happen. So swimming. So there's lots of different ways that we can use to be mindful. So and Lindsay, if you want to shoot me an email after this, I just came across a really good article on mindful parenting and how we can use mindfulness practice when we have kids, especially kids under 3. So if I wasn't sharing there's too many things going on right now for me to look it up, or I'd put it in the link, but I'd happily send that article to you. I thought it was pretty good. All right. So let's move on. Oh, and we've done our comments. So this is sort of summarizing, that first section is we've got this VUCA world that we're living in. Could be a Madonna song, living in a VUCA world. No, it doesn't work. And mindfulness is really this movement from autopilot to aware. So let's now talk a little bit about empathy. And I got to realize I got to bring this in 17 minutes. So Google, which is actually so Search Inside Yourself Leadership Institute is now a separate nonprofit. It's independent of Google, but it actually started as an internal training program at Google. And then they spun it off into the separate institute later. So Google had this project called RE Work, and you can actually Google it. And they were really looking at how do we create the perfect team? And Google, like HP and probably like a lot of our companies, they love their data. And so they embarked on this 2-year project. And they conducted over 200 interviews with Googlers across 180 teams, looking at 250 attributes so they could figure out what makes the perfect team. And the hypothesis was they would find out what is the right mix. So we need 1 Rhodes Scholar, 2 extroverts. We need an engineer who was a theater major and a PhD, and voila, there's our perfect team. And what they found out was they were dead wrong. It didn't really matter who was on a team. What mattered was how they worked together. And they found there were 5 key elements of what made a successful team. So the first was team members feeling like what they did actually mattered and had an impact. The other was meaning. So they actually felt like the work they were doing was meaningful to them in a personal way. That there be structure and clarity. I don't know if anyone else hates murky goals. I know I do. So people like structure and clarity. They like dependability. I'm super blessed with this on my team. It's like if somebody on my team says they're going to do something, they're going to do it. We've got each other's backs. And so that's really important. But the number one was that they have psychological safety. And the easiest way to think about that is just freedom to fail without consequences or shaming. So high trust. So people were able to have this kind of this high trust environment where they could take risks and be vulnerable in front of each other. And so basically these are all skills that lie in the domains of emotional intelligence. So this is just to kind of, since it's executive forum, just sort of a little behind the scenes view of how I think about this is aligning emotional intelligence to the HP way, right? So if we look at, the HP way, we encourage flexibility and innovation, and I align that with self-awareness. Something at HP, we may have some screwed up systems and processes, but you know what? We score every year in our internal employee survey in ethics and integrity. Like we are a highly ethical and we have high integrity. So that's something that everyone's super proud of at HP, and we really mean it. We focus on achievement, contribution. So the original Bill and Dave HP way was, we exist to make a technical contribution. And today our mission is to engineer experiences that amaze, right? So that's what gets us out of bed in the morning. So that's the motivation tower. We have trust and respect for individuals, that aligns to empathy, and achieving our common objectives through teamwork. So that's the leadership tower. And over here on the left, this is the HP, leadership framework. And all of these are emotional intelligence skills, right? So if you're at HP, and probably with most of our companies, we work with smart people. So IQ is table stakes. It's the EQ is how we get to that next level, and how we lead and how we perform at a higher level. And this, just to play with this, Isabel and I worked together on, what would this look like for Out and Equal? How do you align, our mission into the domains of self-awareness? So this can be a fun thing to play with as you think about your own organizations, and how do we take our own mission and vision and values and align that to the EI framework. So we talked about autopilot in the self-awareness section, right? It's our attention's in the past or it's in the future. We're distracted, we're in reaction, we're in judgment, we're acting on habit patterns and assumptions, and this can show up in our interactions with others, right? And with our teams. So if we're talking about mindfulness as this movement from autopilot to aware, when we talk about empathy, it's really developing awareness of others. And so we're going to practice this with a listening exercise. So we're going to move into another dyad using the breakout rooms. So for those who maybe joined a little late, if it is possible for you to enable your webcams, it's really useful when we move into the small dyad discussions to be able to see the other person that you're in dialogue with. So if you are able to turn on your webcam, please do, if that's available. So we're going to move into a listening exercise. Before we do that, we're going to introduce another micro practice. So this is an empathy micro practice. And so what I'd like you to do is just looking at, hopefully you can see the other people. You've got just switch to gallery view if you've got it on speaker view now. And just look at these other people in the room. These other faces of people who want to be better leaders, who want to be more inclusive. And just pick a person. And you're going to use that person. Use is probably the wrong word. We're going to direct this practice towards that person. And so this is an empathy micro practice, and it's done on 3 breaths. And with the first breath, we're settling the mind, just kind of allowing the thoughts to settle. With the second breath, we're seeing a similarity with this other person. This is another person who bothered to dial into a conference call so they could be a better leader. And with the third breath, we're offering kindness. whatever that means for you. May you be healthy, may you be safe, may you be happy, whatever that looks like for you. So let's go ahead and pick a person. And just take a breath to settle the mind. With the second breath, see a similarity. How are you and this person the same? And with the third breath, just offering kindness. So an adaptation for bringing this into the virtual world is when you go into your dyad, I'm going to give you an extra 30 seconds. So just introduce yourself to the other person, not a bio, just I'm Simon, this is where I'm from. And then take these 3 breaths together with this other person you're in the dyad with, just to kind of set this connection for the practice. And then we're going to do a mindful listening practice. So mindful listening means there's going to be a person A, there's a person B. It's a structured way of listening. And person A is going to talk and person B is going to listen. And so listening means not talking. So you're not commenting, you're not adding, you're doing nothing except listening. That doesn't mean you have to be weird and be like a statue or be stony faced. You can nod, you can smile, you can react, but you're not speaking. So the entire 2 minutes belongs to the other person. And then you'll see a little dialogue box pop up in the breakout room that will say, okay, person A wrap up, person B begin. And then you'll have another 2 minutes for a free flow conversation. We have an odd numbers, so there'll be one group of 3. And then for that group, the third person will just go and you won't have a free flow discussion. So these are the topics. So you can jot them down or just take a screenshot. What's surprising to me lately in my life is the kind of person I want to be is, or anything else you want to talk about. So person A will be the person who is closest geographically to the Golden Gate Bridge. So whoever's closest to the Golden Gate Bridge will go first, and then you'll see the pop-up window. And I'm going to give you just an extra 30 seconds at the beginning to do the 3 breaths practice before person A goes. Are there any questions before we begin? All right, I'm going to go ahead and create the breakout rooms. Okay, and looks like we have an even number. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and open the rooms, and I'll see you back here in about 6 minutes. Okay. And if you're watching the recording, you can go ahead and pause the recording and treat this as a journaling exercise. Spend about 3 minutes on either or both topics and just try, once you put the pen to paper, just keep it moving. So what's surprising to me lately in my life is, and then keep writing and just see what shows up. And I'll see you back after 3 minutes. Okay, so we're starting the recording again, and folks are returning from their breakout rooms. All right. Welcome back, those who have already returned. Everyone else will be back in just a few seconds. Okay. And we're back. And we started a little late, but I still want to try to end on time. So if you do have any comments for what that was like, just go ahead and put those in the chat. So the point of the exercise is really just to remember how it feels to connect with others. And typically the comments, we get with this exercise is, wow, this feels really weird to just have someone's full undivided attention. It's really a gift. And for the speaker, sometimes it can also feel like a relief that it takes the social pressure off to provide a witty retort or think of something to say or somehow something to do to fix the situation. We can just give ourselves permission to be present and listen. So this could be an interesting thing to do in stealth, to just decide, I'm going to just mindfully listen to this person. And so that can be an interesting thing to try. So I'm going to move fairly quickly. Simon, I'll just say real quick, the difference between empathy and sympathy, Brene Brown has a fabulous video on the difference between empathy and sympathy. Anyone who wants to see it, wants a link, you can probably just find it on YouTube, or you can send me an email and I can send you that link. But it's a very important distinction. So the work of empathy is really, how do we move from autopilot to aware to connected, to truly being connected with each other. So these are the practices that we've covered. We've covered quite a bit of ground in 90 minutes. So we've talked about the 3 breaths practice, mindful breathing, mindful listening, and that shift to connection practice, which can be really good before we're about to hit the button on Skype to meet with someone. And it works really well for someone that we may be in conflict with, to see a similarity and offer kindness before engaging with that person. It's amazing how much they change if we do these practices. So this is our summary. We need some skills for this VUCA world in which we live. Mindfulness is moving from autopilot to aware. Awareness of others creates connection and empathy, and then looking for ways to practice, both dedicated and integrated. So I'm going to move very quickly into next steps. And again, this deck will be sent out. So there's a ton of books out there. Search Inside Yourself is a good book. If you're a science nerd, Altered Traits really goes into a lot of the neuroscience around mindfulness and emotional intelligence. So you may enjoy that. There are some really good apps out there. I use Insight Meditation Timer. Why Does It Work is a good one that's built from the ground up for business people. And they're actually right now offering a free trial for COVID. So you can get a free trial for their app. So highly recommend it. There's also SIYLI has some links for resources for resilience. And actually a friend of mine at Facebook created this crowdsourced self-care library that I really like. And then, of course, you can email me. So Craig@businessawakens.com. And with questions about the program, if you're interested in bringing this work into your organization, I'd love to help you with that. And then you can also reach out to Search Inside Yourself Leadership Institute. So let's just together.
Thank you.
Yeah. So let's just take one breath, and then I'm going to turn it over to Isabel to close. Thank you. All right, Isabel, bring us home.
Sure. So I know you have to get to calls, and a couple of people dropped off. So as I said in the chat, expect an email from me later today. It's not going to be crazy long, but it is going to have a few details. So it's going to redirect you to a password protected page on our website, so you don't have to keep worrying about these emails. And it's going to show all of the registration links for the upcoming virtual expo series. So I have a number of sessions coming up through July. We'll have links to those LinkedIn groups, so you can sort of opt into the correct session. And if you really hate the whole idea, then you don't have to do it, rather than us inviting you and you rejecting it. And the third and very exciting piece, as you all know, your ExFo registration now includes Summit registration as well. And since Summit registration is open, I'm going to make sure that all of you have that code and you can register. That also tells, for those of you who are with sponsor companies, they don't need to worry about your seat at Summit, right? That's sort of counted separately with these executive forum registrations. So I'll be circulating all of that out. If you could just really quickly go to the next slide, and that'll be the last slide for me, Craig. Just to highlight, our next session is scheduled for Thursday, May 28th. Top 6 leadership competencies every LGBTQ+ leader should know and grow. That will be a webinar. You don't have to turn on your camera, and I just realized I'm going to make that notation because some of them will be webinars, some of them will be meetings, but that particular one will be a webinar. If you can't make it, you're really not missing anything particular on the live component. We'll be able to kind of really quickly access that recording. We will have a separate session, details will be in that email, just kind of this group with Dr. Iacovelli to go through his work group and kind of debrief from that particular lecture. So if you can only make it to one live session of those, I would say save that June date. Again, you'll get details, Zoom links, abstracts, all that good stuff from me later today, potentially early tomorrow, depending on, you know, comms issues here on our end, but you'll get that information shortly. So I just want to thank you all for joining this call, and look forward to chatting with everybody in the future.
Thank you. And if anyone has questions and wants to ask them, I can hang out for a few minutes, but I'll stop the recording now. Thank you, Isabel.
Excellent. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.